Selamat datang di Jakarta Content Week Sinergi Asia Tenggara yang diselenggarakan oleh Yayasan 17.000 Pulau Imaji dengan dukungan Direktorat Jenderal Kebudayaan, Kementerian Pendidikan, Kebudayaan, Riset dan Teknologi Republik Indonesia, serta Lembaga Pengelola Dana Pendidikan LPDP melalui program pemanfaatan hasil kelola dana abadi kebudayaan. Welcome to Jakarta Content Week, Southeast Asia Synergy, the 17,000 Islands of Imagination Foundation, in collaboration with the Directorate General of Culture, the Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology of Indonesia, and the Education Fund Management Institution, LPDP, through the Cultural Endowment Fund Utilization Program proudly presents Road to Jakarta Content Week Southeast Asia Synergy. For your information, you can find Agustinus Wibowo books at the registration desk. This event aims to bridge the literary worlds of Southeast Asia countries, overcoming challenges such as language differences, geopolitical barriers, and the lack of previous initiatives to connect our diverse literary communities. Additionally, it will be beneficial if the works of Southeast Asian writers could be more recognized in their own region compared to works from other parts of the world. In a moment, we will start the Can the Southeast Asian Landscape Be Understood Through B-Side Stories session. I will call our moderator who will guide today's session, Teddy Wijaya Kusuma. Teddy Wijaya Kusuma manages both an independent bookshop and publishing house in Pasar Santa, South Jakarta. He writes and edits fiction. His novel, Semasa, co-authored with Macy Ang, was published in 2018. He is also an editor at Post Press, and Macy Ang is the editor for the Book of Jakarta, a collection of short stories published by Coma Press, a publisher based in Manchester, UK. For Teddy Wijaya Kusuma, this floor is yours.
Thank you, MC, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Taman Ismail Marzuki. And this is a Saturday night in Jakarta. We have so many options to do other than coming to literary events, but yet you made it here. So this is So I know that we found a kindred spirit in each of you around the room today. So tonight we will discuss, the title of the discussion is Can the Southeast Asian Landscape Be Understood Through the B-Side Stories? So when we talk about the B-sides, what comes to mind for so many readers will be about the forgotten treasures, the one that slipped through the cracks, or the one that is not commonly referred to in the schools, or in not part of the literary canon, or those that being disregarded by the mainstreams, such as festivals, awards, or the bestsellers list. So, but yet this is a stories that is actually maybe capable of explaining or complementing the one that's the dynamics within the society. And through times, the B stories itself also ever evolving. Sometimes the one that is on A side at one point can be B side in the others, or the one that is lay underground can be the A side in the others. It's depending on the shift of the political situation, the taste, the norm, the values within the community, and many others. So this is a very dynamic situation, and it is very interesting for us to be able to tackle this during this discussion and to better understand the landscape of literary in the Southeast Asia region. So tonight we will have 4 distinguished speakers, and from 3 countries that gladly will also explain about 4 countries, because Eric here can talk a lot about the situation in the Philippines and also in Singapore. So I will read some of the profile of each of the speakers, and I will read because I don't want to miss some important part of the profile and the speakers. So next to me is Eric Tinsay Valles. He has published poetry collection, A Word in Transit, and After the Fall, Dirge Among Ruins. He co-edited several anthologies and has won awards such as the Gosin Top Creative Writing Prize. Eric has presented his work at prestigious university and is a director of the Poetry Festival in Singapore. And I know that this year is the 10th anniversary of the Poetry Festival in Singapore. This is a very vibrant festival, so congratulations as well for Eric. So next to Eric is Jidanun, and we can call her Lee. She is the youngest recipient of the Southeast Asia Literature Award, or SEA, right? With over 25 books in various genres. Her works are popular among literary communities and mainstream readers. One of her novels, City of Stars, was adapted into a TV series, earning positive reviews both in Thailand and internationally. Welcome, Lee. And next to Lee is our beloved Ratih Kumala. She is a professional writer from Indonesia. She has been actively writing since 2003, so this is your 21 years anniversary of writing. Congratulations, Ratih. And to date, she has written 8 works of fiction, novel, and short story collection. Besides writing books, she also writes screenplay for film, television, and other digital media. Her novel, Gadis Kretek, has been translated into 6 foreign languages and has been adapted into series on Netflix. Her latest novel is Saga dari Samudra, an action novel set to be published in 2024. Ratih Kumala currently lives in Jakarta. And last but not least is our own Agustinus Wibowo. He is an Indonesian travel writer and photographer known for his exploration of themes like identity and culture. His travels have taken him to Afghanistan, Central Asia, Papua New Guinea, as well as to the Netherlands and Suriname to study the Indonesian diaspora. His notable book includes Selimut Debu, A Blanket of Dust, Garis Batas, Borderline, Titik Nol or Zero, and his latest work, Kita dan Mereka, Us and Them, which delve into the complexity of identity and belonging. So please give an applause for all the speakers tonight. So when we talk about the B sides and A side, I will begin the discussion by asking each of the speakers to reflect on 1 or 2 past decades in your respective countries. What is A sides in your country context, and how they were being defined, and how the B side provides an alternative that may better capture or complement the narrative of this Southeast Asian landscape. So because we have 4 speakers, I will start it from Ratih, okay, because we will delve into the Indonesian context on how your reflection on the A side and B side in Indonesian context. Please, Ratih.
Thank you, Teddy. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming in this evening. Other than pacaran, you guys are coming here, so thank you very much. So, I think you mentioned earlier about the verse in Indonesia. It's easier for us to explain the A side and the B side of the story. That the A side is the one that is taught in school, or we call it like the government version, and this is the one that because the history lesson in Indonesia is one of the most important lesson subject for school, and everyone must know who their like heroes and heroine, who the proclamator, and etc. etc. While the B side is the one that is untold, the one that is covered, and to know what's the B side, we must ask the living witness of that history. And you know, in our country, because we relatively young, we only have our Independence Day on 1945. So this like these living witness are still around, so we can ask them. And there are era where we are being, we cannot tell the other side of the history. But then after Reformasi in 1998, it's relatively easy for us to, uncover the untold story, and we get to know what's the other side of the story. I think that's for me.
Thank you, Rati. So this is a very apt approach on how to see the A side and B side. First is from the political standpoint of the country itself. What is the official story from the governments? And the B side is the one that is not officially told or taught in schools. Before we move to another country, maybe can you elaborate more on how the thing is shifting from the couple of decades ago? Is that and in the current situation, how things are changing and what's interesting now from the previously is considered the B sides and now maybe something that is becoming more mainstreams.
For example, like I think I have to talk about the 1965 in Indonesia, because there are moments that the 1965 is very closely related to the communism, and at that time we were taught at school that communism is forbidden in Indonesia. But after 98, the living witness of those who so-called communism, whether they were joined the Communist Party or not, they start to speak up. And many of them also write books, although sometimes maybe in the early era of reformasi, the government still try to, to bound our voice. But, now I feel like it's more free, but we do have limitation, and we still have some kind of, we can't tell all, except if, we believe with this person, something like that. But the story is being uncovered little by little, I think.
Okay, thank you, Rati. I think also for the audience, in the spirit of reading each other's works in Southeast Asia landscape, this is a very interesting take also from Rati on how today's the stories from the one that's called the marginalized, the stories from the political detainee or the victim of the 1965 massacres is something that is now read more and more in Indonesian context. So this is a very good development in the variety of the narrative in Indonesian context. Not only the one that related to the 1965, maybe also we remember a couple of years ago there is the memoir from the freedom fighter of Timor-Leste, for example, that is now being published and openly discussed in Indonesian context, which is certainly before in the context that provided by Rati, who was on the B side, is now more and more going to the surface. So after Rati, I will move back to Thailand, and Rati has explained about how the political situations in Indonesia suppress some of the works, but there is also other things that is very interesting for Indonesian readers in the context of Thailand, on how not only the political stance but also norms in the society, the values in the society. We saw that in maybe before 2015, we discussed previously regarding the boys' love genre. There is a very subcultures it's part of the subculture in Thailand, but now it's more in gaining spotlight and even sell much more well compared to the literary canon in Thailand. So now it's translated to many languages, Russia, England, etc. So the shift of norm in the society is also the one that creating a surfacing of the one that previously considered the B-sides. So I want, maybe you can reflect on the situation in the Thailand, on the B-sides and the A-side. Thanks.
So maybe we start with the historical point for the literature of A-side and B-side in Thailand. Oh, what a rich topic. For Thailand, we have, yes, the A-side history, and we also have many of the B-side history, but in the literature field, I think we didn't have many of B-side story in the literature because many people still live in the shadow of fear. But I think after COVID-19, many things have changed, and the popularity of internet and social network system make the B-side history of Thailand become more and more in the limelight. But mostly it was like a Facebook status or a Twitter, but not yet in the literary world. If we moving to the B-side of LGBTQ novel or boy loves, let's say that if you think A-side is awarded literature, so B-side is maybe romance and maybe boy love, maybe fantasy, sci-fi or something. But if we didn't categorize it by the award, if we categorize it by the commercial field, like the bestseller shelf or something, romantic and boy love is the A-side of the market. And awarded literature is like somewhere, maybe like that place. So why Thai BL is gain a popularity? Actually, this topic is quite in trend for somehow. I have wrote 2 articles about this for website or even like Italian magazine. So yes, in 2012, 2015, it was a subculture. You will not see a boy love novel in the bookstore because they are just sold by indie writer, like publishing on herself and going to some little event selling it together. It was just like Comic-Con, the event that people go to sell comic they draw by themselves. But then the interest in boy love is bigger and bigger. I think the blooming of Facebook and social network is also the catalyst of this popularity, because before the social network, we the boy love reader, the boy love writer communicate in web board or sometimes in maybe web blog. But after the Twitter and Facebook connect us together, many people come to the place and they discover, oh, this is quite good. I like this, and more people come in the industry, and more money got into the subculture event. Then the big companies start saying, oh, that is a piece of cake. So many big publishers in Thailand come and publish boy love, even though like maybe 10 years ago they say no to the manuscript with LGBTQ, but for now they're like, okay, we are really into boy love. After the big publisher coming into the field, the bookstore and the big bookstore in Thailand, the chain bookstore, have the BL on the shelf, and also, okay, on the top seller shelves also. Many people see it, and then many and more people see it, and then people from TV industries feel like that, oh, if they have a lot of reader, it tend to have a lot of viewer also. So they're making a TV series with many handsome men, like many handsome young actors, and it's become international popular. At first it was just popular in Thailand, but then people in Taiwan, people in Russian, people who speak Spanish and Portuguese around the world come to Thai BL culture. I might say that the awarded literature book in Thai is rarely translated to another language, but for BL right now, many of Thai BL was now in Taiwan in the bookstore. They are bestseller or something. If the series is on air, they become a bestseller. There are some Russian publisher that need Thai manuscript, and also if you go to the YouTube that have a BL clip from Thai producer, there are lots of people commenting in Spanish and commenting in Portuguese. So we're making an international hit, I guess.
Thank you, Lee. So this is a very interesting also development in Thailand. Just for the context, just in case, when we mention the BL genre, this is a boy love. It means that the characters is male and they fell in love with each other. Two of protagonists is usually male and they fell in love with each other, and this has become a genre that is really gaining the popularity in Thailand from the one that is previously subcultures now becoming the mainstream. Maybe before we move a bit, just a follow-up questions to Lee, and how the BL previously was now become very popular commercially, and how was the reception on the literary community in terms of what you mentioned previously, the more serious one on this genre?
คือ when I got the awarded in SEA Rise Award in 2017, many people know that I also write romantic BL novel, and people come to ask me, but what is that BL novel? What did it look like? What is the plot? And I have to explain to, if you are the younger generation, I don't have to explain, but if someone from the boomer generation, they come and what is this thing and why it was very popular, and I have to explain like BL 101. And but I feel like the boomer in Thailand have open mind. Maybe because in Thai we have very many queer people around, and we feel we didn't feel against them. So people are like, oh, okay, it was a romantic book. Then they become more and more accept, and also people in Gen Y and Z and down, they're familiar with BL, like they're growing up and see it like how we see Korean series, like how we see maybe HBO series. So now, as I see, there are many BL sending into the competition of awarded literature. However, it depends, because if you write very romantic, very like puppy love school or university love, you will not send it to the competition. But some people write about LGBTQ life, and they are trauma, and maybe like mental state, or some BL even shade into political point of view. So it was serious enough to be in the competition. As I think new generation writer interest in LGBTQ, both like boy and boy love or girl and girl love. So they write more about this, and also the new generation in Thai, they are active citizens for political things. So now BL and political and literature award is like starting to blend into each other, and it start being more diversity in awarded literature in Thailand.
Thank you so much, Lee. And again, on the spirit of reading each other's in the Southeast Asians, we also from Indonesia is pretty proud of how the queer literatures that was previously very is underground, and now more and more getting an accolades. And some of the Indonesian queer authors with the queer stories get prominent awards, even though the situation is very challenging. Now more and more the queer stories is also being celebrated in Indonesia. That is a very good news. And now we will move back to a bit to the Philippines. And Eric will provide us 101 of a B-sides and A-sides in the Philippines context. And Eric is preparing one presentation. Can the committee show it up?
Right, so it's great that you're all here on a Saturday night. It's very exciting to talk about books and B-side stories. Do I have to?
Okay. The committee has the Eric presentation is on. Okay.
Sure. Right. So, how do you talk about B-side stories? So, I would say that B-side stories are actually positional or performative, in the sense that in the original context, B-sides they just happen to be on the reverse side of the vinyl record, right? And so they're fated to be obscure and forgotten ordinarily. But then occasionally, the B-side songs could become hits. Like you've got Elvis Presley's Hound Dog, or the Beatles' Strawberry Fields, and the Beach Boys' God Only Knows. These are B-side songs, but they have become more enduring than the A-sides. And so it is with literary work, whether it's commercial or critically acclaimed. I would say that artists and writers have a lot of B-side stories to tell. And so it is with the Philippines and Singapore. You might not think of these countries as writing about B-side stories, but they do. Just full disclosure, I'm here, I think, because the National Book Council of the National Book Development Board of the Philippines recommended me to come here. So I'm talking about the Philippines first. But I'm also a writer and a festival director based in Singapore. So I've studied some Singapore literature on my own. So I'm going to talk about Singapore later on. Here's the bomb for the night. So B-side stories have always been present in Philippine literature, right from the beginning. Someone mentioned Jose Rizal earlier in one of the panels. Okay, so you've got a strange mix of economics, politics, and culture in the Philippines and Singapore and other places. Even if the first writers of the Philippines, the ones who got published, belong to the elite class, they would be called ilustrados in the Philippine parlance. But they chose to write about ordinary people, the marginalized, the rebels. And so you find that in both novels of Jose Rizal, which are being translated to English and other languages. Yeah, so it's always been there. And maybe the B-side stories happen to be cyclical. After a while, they become A-sides, A-side stories, and the writers become A-listers. And so that's how it is with the Philippines. And let me begin. When you talk about Philippine poetry, because I write poetry, you have to begin with Jose Garcia Villa. But the same can be said in Singapore, right? So Jose Garcia Villa was the first migrant Asian American poet who made it big in the US. And he was followed by others like Carlos Bulosan. And you've got people who were trying to make it big in the States, like Jessica Hagedorn and so many other people. So you can see that they all belong, almost all of them belong to the elite class. But yet in their new environment in the United States, they became outcasts of sorts. So they were telling B-side stories in their new context. So there had always been room for B-side stories in both the Philippines and Singapore. So there were three phases you can say, in which this is shown, as mentioned by Rita earlier, Rati, I'm sorry. Yeah, so it's the same trajectory with the Philippines and to a certain extent Singapore. There was a formation of a national literature very early on. And in the late 19th century, Jose Rizal and some of the reformers were trying to fight for first autonomy and then independence. So they were concerned about this national identity. And then in the middle of the 20th century, that was also a big concern for the new country that was the Philippines. So people talked about this identity. And even if people moved to the States or other countries, they were still writing about their barrios, their small towns, and how courting happens there. Oops, oh my gosh. It disappeared. Okay, I'm sorry. The second phase in the Philippines would be the wave of people trying to make it big in the US. And they became more cosmopolitan, and so they embraced a lot of modernist techniques in their works, especially in poetry. And there was this activism as well, people trying to champion the downtrodden of society. And so you have established writers talking about the underbelly of society. So that's when B-side stories came to the fore as well. Oops, keep pressing. And third, and then, okay, it's from my own reflection. I think that the audiences are kind of late when it comes to these things. So these ways of thinking and changes are initiated by artists and writers, and eventually people catch on and they become popular as novels or as poetry. Okay. Yeah, so Jose Garcia Villa became popular in the 1930s. He published an Asian poetry book, right, in the States. It was published by Charles Scribner's and Sons in 1933, Footnote to Youth. I'm sorry, this is a collection of short stories. He also published poetry collections, the first one being Have Come, Am Here, in 1942, right? And he followed that up with at least 2 more volumes in the States. So Jose Garcia Villa was a prominent Filipino writer in the States, and he was performative. He was like a walking B-side story. Yeah, so you would imagine, ordinary people or those who are rebelling against society to look a little different, and so did he. So he put on outrageous costumes and adornments that you probably wouldn't expect of his class. He belongs to the Ilustrado class, but he was trying to adapt as well to his new environment in the States. So he tried writing like E. E. Cummings. So he had this very famous poem made up of commas, right? And that was very novel at that time. But then his fate was just like that of many Asian Americans in the States. So they seem to be accepted and assimilated. They're the model immigrant community. But at the same time, they're treated with suspicion, and they're not fully accepted as a part of the American canon. So was his fate. So Jose Garcia Villa had a lot of friends in important places. The top editors of journals, writers. I think Iris Murdoch and some of these big writers were his friends, right? And yet, in his trying to be more like the American writers through his experimentation, his avant-garde work, he kind of fell flat on his face. And then he was panned for his second collection of poetry. right? And there's actually more. Sorry. Here's an example of his work. I'm not going to read it aloud, but you can try to see there how he foregrounds very ordinary things, like he's talking about ants at one point. Ordinary people, and then he has this very idiosyncratic way of expressing his ideas in these strange meters, and that was his work. And so this rootlessness can also be seen in other Filipino writers. You've got F. Sionil Jose, who was a novelist. He was writing about poor farmer folks in Pangasinan, in the northern island of the Philippines. So he made a living out of that. So he had this trilogy based in his hometown of Rosales. You've got other writers like the late Marnie Quilates, who passed away just last month, right? So Marnie wrote 6 books, and he frequently wrote about ordinary people, farmers in Bicol, that's the southern part of the northern island of Luzon in the Philippines. And he wrote about how they were trying to start all over after the eruption of the Mayon volcano in his home province, right? And he also was avant-garde, like Jose Garcia Villa. In his works, unfortunately I won't be able to read that to you tonight. And he also wrote about how Asians could feel out of place in big settings like the El Prado Museum in Madrid. And that one I can read to you tonight. This is an Asian at the Prado. So it's the big museum where you find El Grecos and Picassos in Madrid. So self-consciously, maybe self-reflexively would be the better word. I roamed the hallways and galleries of Spain's Museo Nacional del Prado. Oh, I am not clad in any ethnic habiliment to make me feel properly shy, strange, or foreign on these shiny floors, looking up, maybe gawkingly at the Maha Desnuda while ignoring the Maha Vestido, or the terror in the peasants' faces in their execution in Tres del Mayo, or even the illusions of royalty and mirrors in the lovely Las Meninas, the resplendent sinfulness of the garden of earthly delights, in countless, unnameable frames of Rubens, Titian, and El Greco, all of them watching me back as if I am an exhibit myself, clad in Khmer silk of loose pants and bolero, or the Visayan pintado in loincloth and tattoos, straight out of the Boxer Codex, or even more recent, the Katipunan Guard's Rayadillo. But that is all pretend, and in hindsight, as I played the only souvenir I brought back from the Prado's basement cafe, a couple of CDs of Andalusian Cante Hondo, the sonorous tabor pipe, and Euskara lyrics of radical rock from the Basque Country, which is just as well, because I imagine myself lingering at the Prado, strutting defiant with my unrepentant post-colonial ego. So you've got that rootlessness, even in contemporary poetry, as found in Marnie Quilates. And I think, do I have more? Yeah, I'll talk about Singapore later on.
Thank you so much, Eric. So you also mentioned that in the context of the B-side and A-side, that there is also how the B-sides is actually voicing those that is from the marginalized communities or the part. So is that always the case?
Okay. Yes and no. always in the case that people like the seamless or the scandalous, and B-side stories are usually like that. So right now in the Philippines, there's a lot of talk about the relationship between our two-time gold-winning Olympian and his mother, and how she's against his fiancée. So that's the sort of talk that they're having, and I won't be surprised if actually Andrea could have books about that very soon. Yeah, those are the B-side stories that catch the people's imagination in the Philippines, and I suppose in many other countries. Yeah, so people are drawn to the seamless, to the unseemly, rather. Yeah.
Thank you, Eric. So now I'll move to Agustinus, and how from the previous speakers we got from Marathi how the political position of the governments of the narrative really defining what is the A sides, and from Eric we also see how the B side is the one that is voicing the marginalized, the one that is not represented in the common narrative, and this must really influence how you approach your work. Like you're traveling a lot, you're traveling to the border of Indonesia and Papua New Guinea with the stories of separatism. That is always something that can have a two sides always. So how does this affect your approach to your own writing?
Yeah, when I received the theme, an invitation to talk in this event, it took me a while to define what is A-side and B-side. And based on your discussions here, there are so many definitions how we define. And I grew up in the 1990s, so maybe some of you knew when we have this kind of audio cassette, and then we play, the best songs are usually on the A-side, right? And then after we finish A-side, we don't turn to B-side, we just rewind. Yeah, rewind and then play again. So the songs in the B-sides are mostly the songs that never be played, never be heard, and maybe silenced. So I try to connect this idea of A-side and B-side to my own. I grew up as Chinese diaspora here. I'm the third generation. And in the 1980s, 1990s, during Suharto regime, the minority voice, especially the Chinese voice, in Indonesia was totally silenced. We were not even allowed to have our Chinese names in our documents. We could not celebrate Chinese cultural events, and then cannot freely embrace Chinese religions. Everything have to be hidden, and it was like we had to hide our own identity. And we had so many stories that was, like Rati said, there were so many stories that I heard in my house was completely have to be kept inside the house. Yeah, so my father was telling me the story back then before the 1965, and the Chinese were living, they could study Chinese in the schools, and they could celebrate the Chinese festivals, and so many secret stories about the regime, about Suharto, that we could not even dare to say outside the house. So there are many ideas of that I grew up with this kind of stories. And in the 1998, that is another dark history of Indonesia that we still don't talk openly until today. There was an attack, many attacks that were targeting the Chinese. And after that, Indonesia came to turmoil in the early 2000s with ethnic clash all over Indonesia, and the separatist movement here and there. And I grew up with this, and I was deeply connected by the conflicts, especially the racial conflicts, because having my identity silenced and then seeing that no hard that you try to adopt the A side story. You have to adopt the A side identity. You're still outsider in this country. And this made me think of what Indonesia really is. In the 1990s, we saw many countries dissolved, disintegrated, Soviet Union disintegrated, Yugoslavia disintegrated, and many outsiders, experts also suggested that Indonesia would be the next Balkan. But yeah, we lost East Timor in the election, in the referendum, and then but the majority of Indonesia is still intact until today. And that raised question with me, inside me, what is really the power that made Indonesia survive until today? Because Indonesia is a country full of minorities, full of B-sides, full of hidden stories, full of dark histories that nobody is talking about, and full of repressed identities. But this country still survive. And this raised my curiosity. What is the secret of Indonesia? What is the really meaning of Indonesia that made it survive despite of all of this turmoil? And because of this, I started the journey. And I think to understand Indonesia, we cannot just see it from the perspective of the center. Indonesia is very much Java-centrical. If we see many writers, many medias, many plays, movies, all focused in this area, the majority of it. And we rarely hear the stories from the periphery, the borders, the minorities. And because I started as minority myself, I wanted to see Indonesia from the perspective of the periphery. And that made me started my journey to understand Indonesia across its border. Back then in 2014, I traveled to the border of Indonesia and Papua New Guinea. If we see on the map, it's one of the strangest borders in the world. We see a straight line dividing an island. And on the east side is Indonesia, and the west side is Indonesia, and then the east side is Papua New Guinea. And since I was a kid, I always questioned what is there across that line. You know, even though Indonesia is a neighboring country of Papua New Guinea, we almost hear nothing about Papua New Guinea, and most Indonesians know nothing about our neighbors. And even when I said to my friends, I'm going to Papua New Guinea, and everybody was asking me, in which province is that? Is that West Papua or Papua province? Many people don't even know that Papua New Guinea is a country. And I traveled to the area, across the border, in the Papua New Guinean side, along the line, and deep in the forest. So if you see on the map, you saw almost nothing, no road, no villages. And the reality is like that. It's totally jungle and swamps. And I was traveling by hitchhiking canoe from village to village along the river. And until I arrived in Papua New Guinea, I just realized that this area is so much connected to Indonesian history, but we just never know, because in this area there are many West Papuan refugees. They were traveling, they were refugees from Indonesian side of Papua and living in Papua New Guinea for more than 3 or 4 decades. And we almost heard nothing about them, because the history of Papua freedom movement and the real history of Papua is, of course, is a very sensitive topic in Indonesia, and it is we only know what we learn to school, as Rati said, that we always have the idea of national identity and national history, who is bad and who is wrong, who is the enemy, and we always have that. And then we always think that the separatism is only about the good guys and the bad guys. But when you live there together with the refugees, you see, like, you hear the story of struggle, of this injustice that they receive, of hopes, of despair. And I was living there. It was very dangerous for Indonesian like me to stay together in the OPM, we call it OPM, it's Free Papua movement organizations, and I was staying in the camps as Indonesian, but of course I was using my B side, not as an Indonesian. I used my Chinese identity. They suspected me as a spy. They of course hate Indonesian very much, and but they were happy that they could tell their stories in Indonesian because they speak Malay as their language. And I said to them, I came here because I was also, as a Chinese Indonesian, I also know the feeling of being rejected of who you are, and I want to hear your story. And that made them accepted me, and I could stay in the refugees camp, and I hear stories that I think majority of Indonesians would have difficulty to get access to. And there are many interesting stories about the border, but I don't know whether we have much time. I want to share one small story that is, for us who live in the center, it just doesn't make sense. But for the people living in the periphery, it's just the reality and it's real for them. So these people in Papua New Guinea, the Indonesian refugee, the West Papuan refugees, they came from the Indonesian side of the border. They came to Papua New Guinea side of the border. At the beginning, they were accepted by the Papua New Guineans because they were from the same tribes, they shared the same culture, they were all Melanesians with the same language, and they were accepted. But again, even in the side of the border, there is also a side of B side. And these people are B side in this side, and they are another B side on that side. So, and no matter they were coming from the same tribe, maybe they shared the same grandfather or their great-grandfather, but because of the border split them, it started the idea, oh, who is the outsider and who is the native? And these people, as the refugees, they are considered as outsider. So there were conflict. So there were conflict of land and food, and the Papua New Guineans starting to be worrying about these OPM refugees, and some conflict became very strong, and these OPM refugees, they have to move back to the jungle. So I met this community of these OPM refugees, and they had to move back from they were from, and they didn't realize that they already arrived back in Indonesia. Because the border is totally in the jungle. You cannot see the line in reality. It's just in the middle of jungle, and if you are there, you will never know that you are in Indonesia or in Papua New Guinea. So they arrived in Indonesia. It's about like 5 kilometers in Indonesian side of the border. They live, they sustain by themselves. They even built their school, and they put Papua New Guinean flag on that school. So this might be the only Papua New Guinean school inside Indonesia. And because this is in the jungle, even the Indonesian soldiers, army, they didn't even know about this community existed. And they thought that this community are Papua New Guinean tribes who didn't know they live in Indonesia. So when I arrived there, the soldier came, 3 months before I arrived, the Indonesian soldier came, and then they said to this OPM refugee, okay, we know that you are from Papua New Guinea, but you know this is the land of Indonesia, so you have to put Indonesian flag here. And then when and because the guy in the village, they accepted Indonesian flag, the Papua New Guinean villages were all afraid that Indonesia is coming to attack Papua New Guinea. So they were all angry with this refugee community because they said, you are inviting the Indonesian soldiers to attack us. And you know, in our narrative, as Rati said, we here hate communism, communist is a bad word in here. But if you go to Papua New Guinea, the sad story is that Indonesia is a communist country. In Papua New Guinea, many Papua New Guineans think Indonesia is a communist country and it's a dangerous country that is going to attack Papua New Guinea. So they are very afraid of Indonesia. So I talked with the people in the village. So who do you think you are? Are you Indonesian or Papua New Guinean? And then they said like, we don't know who we are. If Indonesia built road here, we will be Indonesians. If Papua New Guinea built roads here, we will be Papua New Guineans. So yeah, this is A side of B side stories. This is stories that for us maybe doesn't make sense because people living in the center, we know that our border is so clear, it's so fixated, it's so absolute. But when you are there is nothing absolute about this. There is nothing absolute about A side and B side. And it's very important to see from that perspective to understand us. Okay.
Thank you so much, Agustinus. So, from these stories told by Agustinus, when we use the analogy of a cassette, the B side is the side that is unheard, right? So we do not know the idea of the entire album when we don't listen to these B sides. And Agustinus come to the border, to the OPM area, as somebody who only listened to the A sides, right? And as a question, and with the question, why this album still exists when you came there and you do not know the B sides? And of course, now that you heard the B sides, how does that, the personal stories, the turbulence, etc., affect you on your view of the nations and also affect how you write about it?
Okay. So I believe when we want to understand our identity conflicts or any other political conflicts, it's never only a matter of what we see. For example, racial conflict is not only about race. Religious conflict is not only about religions. And we are the people who are involved in these conflicts. We are, no matter whether you are minority or not, you know, with all of these political conflicts as well in Indonesia, the identity politics, and it all drag us to the conflicts. But when I arrived in Papua New Guinea and talked with this OPM, and I also reflect to my own journey as Chinese diaspora here, the issue is never simple, it's only about our ethnicities. There are always the big history behind. So in the case of Papua New Guinea, the case of Indonesian Papua issue, you cannot talk about only the Melanesian and Asian identities that is like feasible. The differences are very much feasible. But there's also the issue of the history, the Cold War politics that affect the policy of America, of Netherlands, and how it came into the fate of Papua, the West Papua, to be part of Indonesia. You have to understand the global politics of the time, the geopolitics of that time. And about my Chineseness, when I have to make peace with my Chinese identity living in Indonesia, I wrote a memoir. The name of this book is Titik Nol, or in English it's Zero, and it will be soon as a Netflix series as well. When I wrote this book, I also interviewed my father. I talked with my mom about the history, and I realized the conflict between Chinese and non-Chinese Indonesians is also rooted very far back into the colonial era, and then also the Cold War politics when China and America, China and Soviet Unions will also try to have power in Indonesian politics as well, and it affected the image of the Chinese people here. So when we talk about the petite histoire, the history of the small people, the little history of the common people, if you see the background, you will see much bigger history behind. And if you understand the history behind, you will see that many of these identity conflicts are just played by the power dynamics. Yeah? And there is no one identity that is permanent. All identity is changing. Our Chineseness is also changing. How the Papuan people from generation to generation define their identity and define their connection with either Indonesia or Papua New Guinea also change. And I also talk with the diaspora, which I talk with the Papuan diaspora in Netherlands. I talk with the Javanese diaspora in Suriname. I also realized that the locality, the neighbor, the place, the country that they live, and their connections with the people around them also can change their perception of identity. And I think at the end, when we talk about the little history, the big history, at the end, it's also, we go back to our persons to define our identity. And I think after my journey, it's a very important journey to make peace with my own identity conflict, is by meeting this diaspora and to reflect their conflict, to understand my own conflict. And one place that for me was very important to help me to make peace with myself is Suriname, where I met the Javanese people here there. Maybe you don't know much about Suriname. That is a country in South America, which is about 18,000 kilometers away. It's north of Brazil. It's a very small country, but the third ethnic groups there, it's a minority, but it's quite big. It's Javanese people, and the Javanese were taken there in Suriname in 130 years ago, about. And before in Indonesia, I was thinking like, with the conflict between me and my Javanese, when I live in my Javanese city, small town, I was only thinking about Chinese versus Javanese. But when I came to Suriname, because I came from Java and I speak Javanese, even though I'm Chinese, the Javanese in Suriname took me as their compatriots. And then they said to me like, welcome home. And suddenly I realized that, yes, I'm also a Javanese. Even though I don't have blood of Javanese, I don't have Japanese DNA, but I speak the Javanese language. I adopt Javanese culture. I live in with the Javanese stories and Javanese ideas. And yes, I'm a Javanese, and I embraced my Javanese identity. And yes, I can be part of A side. It's depending of how I define my A side or B side. I can be part of my A side. And this remind me to what my father said to me. If you think you are a victim, you will be forever a victim. If you think you are a minority, you will be forever a minority. Everything really depends on how we see ourselves. And if we keep seeing ourselves as beside minority, the silence, we will be forever like that. But we can be also part of the bigger community. We can embrace our identities, and identities is everything that we define by ourselves, and it all depends to how we define our identities. Thank you.
Thank you, Agustinus. So one of the very important take from this round of a discussion is that the A sides and B side is always complex. The one that is in A side, it can be many things. It can be the narrative that is supported by the government, or it can be a narrative from the majority. It can be a narrative in the bestseller list. It can be a narrative in the award nominations. That can all be A sides. But the story will never be complete if you don't look to the other side. What is that? So this is also related to how you write, how you read, whether you read only the A side or B side, whether the landscape of the Southeast Asian is only explained by the A side, and whether this is a call of an action to actually look for the other side, define what's your A side, and go for the B sides. I remember one story when I'm in a bookshop. I think 7 years ago, I saw the bookshelf, and we saw that all of the thing in the bookshelf was written by that white male. So at that time, we question ourselves whether this is like a very nice thing to be do in your bookshop, whether you don't see and try to diversify the thing in yourself. So at that time, we try to always mindful on what is there, what is that being promoted, whether all is an A side and what is the A side, what is the B side. So before we go to the audience, we have one bonus. We have a speaker from 3 countries, but one speaker with an expertise of a +1, which is a Singapore. So I will invite Eric to explain about the Singapore context.
Thank you very much. I was just thinking that all this talk about A sides and B sides is so Gen X or Boomer type, because these days, because of streaming, the B side songs can actually land in the charts, and so you have all Taylor Swift songs from her album landing in the Hot 100. So perhaps these B side stories, yeah, so they're just functional. We refer to B-side stories, but we want to refer as B-side stories. And yeah, so Agustinus was talking about politics, right? And in the Philippines, it's actually very cyclical, all this talk about B-side stories, because many years ago, people were talking about an oppressive government and fighting for social justice. And then suddenly, the dictatorship fell, right? And so the people from the bottom are on top. And that went on for one generation, and now we're back to where we were. Some people would say, right? So it's back to sort of dictatorship. And many writers are fighting for social justice. That's why you have people like Marnie Kilatis contributing to this magazine, San Telmo, right? So, but Singapore has not had that problem. There's a presentation for Singapore, I think. Do I have to?
Committee, please.
Yes. I don't have this one before. Yeah, that's from the Philippines. Okay, so Singapore is a B-side story that made good, right? It was this nothing fancy. It's a paraphrase of Lee Kuan Yew's book, from third world to first. That's what it was, right? It was a backwater community, and then through good planning and the hiring of very virtuous people, they managed to attract a lot of foreign investments, right? So maybe we can consider what Singapore poetry is not, right? This is not from me. This is from Ng Ishang, who has been awarded the Singapore Literature Prize, and he writes about LGBTQ issues, right? So even if Proposition 377A was abolished fairly recently, you always have these B-side stories coming to the fore and even enjoying critical acclaim in Singapore, which is very conservative, right? So you don't expect that, but it happens. So Singapore poetry, like Filipino poetry, is not also very Asian. There's a lot of influence from the British and the Americans. In fact, some of the collections of poetry that we have are about road trips to the US, Australia, or Europe. And these are by the top poets in the industry. It's not very avant-garde, but we have people like Yao Kai Chai, who won the Singapore Literature Prize 2 years ago. And they're gaining acceptance, and they are in fact judging competitions as well. And unlike the Philippines, you don't have very angry writers in Singapore, right? So they're more distanced when it comes to addressing political and social discontent. Okay, and but there are B-side themes in Singapore poetry. This is from a website, right? I picked up the top entries there for themes in Singapore poetry, and they're practically all B-side stories. Right? People were rebelling against their Singapore identity. They're talking about all of their hang-ups, and being inappropriate, they're speaking in Singlish. All these are the subject matter of Singaporean poetry. Right? It could be surprising for some people, but yeah, so B-side stories have always been also in Singapore. And this can be traced back in history. The very first Singaporean book that was published in the UK was FMSR, a poem. FMSR stands for the Federated Malay Settlements Railway. By Francis P. Ng. He was killed during the Japanese occupation. And he was reflecting about how pure Malaya was before the arrival of Chinese traders in the 19th century or early 20th century. So he was romanticizing a golden era that had passed. So that's so he was railing against the corruption of the people. And he was writing in the 1930s. Maybe that's not too visible. And then after independence, there was a lot of talk about nationhood. You have people like Edwin Thumbu writing about new myth-making. So they created the Merlion with the Singapore Tourism Board to represent the country. Okay. Yeah, Edwin Thumbu, who also is actually our mentor at the Poetry Festival Singapore. He's 90 years old, but still very sharp. So Edwin Thumbu was cobbling together all these references from both East and West, and he was trying to craft a new literary idiom for Singapore. Okay. Ulysses by the Merlion is the classic Singapore poem. All right, and but you also have talking about Edwin Thumbu. So he also wrote about outcasts. He has this poem about his uncle. Uncle never knew, and his uncle was a communist in the New Republic of Singapore, which is anti-communist, right? So he didn't find his place there. And he was longing to recreate that that idyllic place in China in his dreams, right? So Prof. Thumbu actually wrote about B-side stories as well. And you've got plenty of that in Catherine Lim, who's the most popular novelist in the West. Maybe it's been changed with the epigram there. Selling more books in the UK. So Catherine Lim exoticized the Peranakan culture. Peranakan would be Chinese living among the Malays in Singapore and Malaysia, right? And so this is probably her most famous novel, The Bondmaid, which talks about how a very young girl was indentured to a rich family in Malaysia, and how she had a tragic love story there with one of the scions of the clan. Catherine Lim also liked to write about B-side stories. She has this other collection of short fiction, Little Ironies, which is about common folk in Singapore. You have a taxi driver who is complaining about how his daughter has been corrupted by foreigners coming to Singapore, and he wants to punish all these young people who were they were called sarong party girls at that time, right? And even in plays, you've got Emily of Emerald Hill, which is a classic play written by Stella Kon. Which is about a woman who finds it difficult to negotiate her past, her rich past, and her present, and she can't. She keeps losing control over the family, and in the end, she ends up alone and lonely, right? And an interesting thing about this is as Emily of Emerald Hill is often performed by a man in drag, right? Ivan Heng, I'm gonna watch one of his plays this coming week. Yeah, he usually plays Emily in that play. All right, so Yishang said that Singapore poetry is not very avant-garde, but that's changing as well. You've got people like Desmond Kon, who writes about esoteric philosophies, and he's launching a book of religious poetry next month, co-published by the Poetry Festival. Yeah, so there are more experimentation as well in Singapore. And then we come to Alfian Saad's Malay sketches. Agustino's talking about minority races, right? And Alfian Saad was here earlier. I saw him go out for dinner. He probably isn't here. Yeah, so he is an A-list poet, playwright. What else is he? He writes all sorts of literary genres. And he actually foregrounds the Malay minority, right? Which is rather unusual. And we're actually studying his work in my high school, right? And okay, so this work is also based on tradition of B-side stories, because it's actually, the title is from a collection by a former British governor in Singapore, Frank Swettenham, who observed how Malays used to take opium and they would run amok, right, all over the community. In fact, that is how Malays were portrayed in English literature. Who was it? The Confessions of an English Opium Eater. That was the very first mention of Malays, around the same time that Singapore was established in 1821, thereabouts, right? And so Alfian Saad turns that on its head, and he talks about contemporary Malays who are judging the majority race in contemporary Singapore. And you've got one story there, A Howling, which is all about a dog, which is a silent major character in that story. It's about dialogue, and the story performs it through dialogue between between two neighbors, a Malay woman and a Chinese employer, right? And so the Malay neighbor is concerned that her maid is being made to do something haram, which is to wash the house dog, right? But then so to go around that that ban, so the Malay neighbor actually buys Sirtu soap from Johor. So this like a very modern way of practicing the faith in their household. And in the end, so there's this long conversation between the Malay neighbor, the Chinese employer, and they end up having a big halal lunch, right? And then they're able to smooth out their differences, all because of this silent dog, who is actually a stand-in for the dead son of the Chinese employer. So, yeah, so minority stories are being studied, and they're being bought in Singapore, and it's a very grassroots thing. So people are just drawn to these novel ideas and configurations. So what is Singapore literature going to be like? It's going to be a lot of things, and among the B-side stories that are being told right now are the stories of migrant workers. And again, the Philippines plays an important role there, because there are a lot of Filipino migrant workers in Singapore. And yeah, so I've written a couple of poetry collections, and the second one is being translated into Spanish right now for publication in Peru. And maybe I can read one poem from that, because I added about 12 new poems, and one of which is about migrant workers and how they were affected by COVID-19. You might have read in the papers. So they were just held up in their dorms for many weeks. And of course that dire situation led to some reforms in the way the living conditions are in their dorms. So this is a response to that. This is COVID-19, War of the Worlds. Arms akimbo, migrant workers in face masks, impervious to intimidation by the security guard, stake out a few square feet of parquet floor for prayer mats with gray tape, 1 meter apart. Their red flame eyes try hard not to show that they have been up all night, crying. On the edge above a yard of their dorm, guessing who among them will the ambulance take next. Going through a shield at an air-conditioned ward, squinting through glasses, I scrutinize their symptoms. Save for the color, they have the same furrowed forehead as locals when they are told they're positive. Lungi, toothbrush, paste will be carted away in boxes to Kutek Piat Hospital, where they're given soft pillows. Their hearts are not of stone, so they break down. They've never had soft pillows in Cochrane Lodge 2.
Thank you so much, Eric. So, thank you so much, speakers. We have the remaining 30 minutes, and I would open questions from the audience. Please state your name and to whom you address the questions. Please feel free to ask your question in Bahasa Indonesia if you wish to, and I can translate for the speakers. Okay? Please raise your hand or just goes. Any questions, audience? You've been listening for 1 hour and a half? Okay. Please.
Ya, thank you, Nata. Saya mau bertanya dalam bahasa Indonesia aja ya. Ya, ini menarik sharing bahasa Indonesia. Berbagi tentang kesamaan cerita sesama negara Asia Tenggara ya, karena kita memang berbagi beberapa hal gitu ya. Nah, pertanyaan saya itu dari tadi kan Mas tadi bilang bahwa side stories itu tentang award dan segala ya, salah satunya gitu ya. Nah, di recognize karya dari Asia Tenggara itu kenapa saya tidak menemukannya pada Booker Prize yang sekarang ini misalkan. Padahal dari South Asia, dari India atau Sri Lanka dalam 5 tahun terakhir ini kan ada Gita Nyalishri, ada Sehan Karunitikala, mereka mendapatkan Booker Prize. Nah, mengapa di karya South Asia tidak ada yang muncul gitu ya? Dan saya menantang para penulis yang prominent di depan ini untuk mungkin nanti membawa karya dari perwakilan negara South Asia untuk dapat Booker Prize di masa mendatang ya, semoga ya. Ya, terima kasih.
Terima kasih Mbak Nata. And if we have another questions, I cannot see if the committee can see whether somebody raising hands. Ada yang nanya? Oke, kalau begitu, oh itu ada. Sip.
Selamat malam, terima kasih atas kesempatannya. Nama saya Febri. Saya masih sedikit meraba apa sih yang dapat disebut sebagai B-side story itu. Dalam konteks Indonesia ini, saya merasa bahwa Jawa itu sangat prominen di dalam dunia penuturan sastra di Indonesia gitu. Apakah cerita-cerita dari luar Jawa, misalnya seperti saya dari Sumatera, itu bisa juga disebut B-side story, atau dari Kalimantan itu juga bisa. Dan kemudian apakah ada pola yang serupa seperti ini di negara-negara Asia Tenggara lain gitu. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Febri. Kalau ada satu lagi boleh, kalau enggak saya akan coba tanya. Oke, silakan.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity. Like what I want to say, what I want to ask is actually like, even the A-side stories in Indonesia is still very hard to be read by Indonesian because of our literacy complexity and everything. So what do you think, or like how we can actually tackle that, and how to make the B-side stories being more heard to the community, like in Indonesia or even in the Southeast Asian itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Bibin. Okay, there are 3 questions, and I will translate the first and the second one for the English-speaking speakers. The first question is from Mbak Nata, is that now one of the prominent awards in the world is Booker or other prominent awards, and the question is that what is it from the Southeast Asian works that still lacking, or the situation in which now the nominees or the awards that is got, the work that is got award there is never, if not rarely, from the Southeast Asian country. That's the first questions, and maybe each of the speakers can reflect on that. And the second question is regarding how the narrative from the sense in Indonesia, for example, is very Java-centric. So the Java is the most populous island, and how the narrative is always centralized there, and what about your reflection in your country? Is there an issues on that, and how do we tackle that? And okay, and then the third question is already in English. So okay, who wants to answer that first? The first question is from your reflections nowadays that we are seeing the award-winning works in, for example, International Booker or Booker. It's very rarely is the one that is from Southeast Asians. What is your reflection on that? What is lacking? If you see there is a lacking in our works here, so it's not get accolades internationally, or what are your reflection on that?
The answer may be quite controversial because maybe some of you here may have read the Yellow Face, the new novel that was about how yellow could maybe mean like Chinese Asian writer has many spotlight, because now, you know, Netflix and Disney and everything was into diversity. So they have changed focus from the white cis male literature into more like marginal writers such as Asians. So I think the international competition award, or even in my country competition award, it did not depend on which one is the best, but it is which one is the best in this condition. Like when Thailand is fighting with communism, Delulu communism, I don't know. That's very complicated. at that time there are some type of story that will win the award, and for now it was like 10 year past, 20 year past, and when I win the award, there are a time that they're looking for the new voice of the new generations because we are globalization now. So I think it was my turn because the situation of the world and the country at that time got my work. Although many novel in the shortlist is also the best, also like everyone is the best, but what is the best for the time and condition? And for the international prize is also the same. Maybe they have some new culture that they focus on Asian or minority, so-called minority countries, but I think it depends on the situation and maybe worldwide, world temporarily, that when they start focusing on us in Southeast Asia.
Thank you. Do you have any additions, speakers?
Yeah, so I'm not a novelist, right? But I've talked with a few of them. So maybe greater international exposure and more creative writing programs could help. Because the Philippines had Miguel Sihuko, who won the inaugural Asian Man Literature Prize, right? He wrote that as part of his dissertation, I think, in Adelaide. In the UK and the US, there are a lot of writers who get to polish their works through these MFA programs. And so maybe if there will be more of that in Southeast Asia, the Philippines and Singapore have these programs. I suppose Indonesia would have as well, MFA graduate writing programs. Not at the moment. So perhaps that could help. Also, international exposure. Tan Tuan Eng is based in South Africa, but before that, he probably. Okay, well, I haven't talked with Tan Tuan Eng. He must have spent a lot of time revising his work with mentors in other countries, so that helped him. And who else? Yeah, I suppose. And also, Southeast Asians should try to write to more literary agents. I had a teacher before, Li Jingjing. She wrote and disappeared. And she tried sending her manuscript to many different literary agents. She received a lot of rejection letters. But then every time she was sending a new query letter, she would revise the work and it would turn out better. And so, yeah, sending to more literary agents and publishers could actually make one's work better. Yeah.
Okay, maybe Rati and Agus can also add on this, and as well as the second and third questions regarding how the situation in Indonesia is a very Java-centric and how things can actually be improved from that point on.
Yeah, well, I agree when you said that Indonesia is very Java-centric, but I don't think it's a matter of where you look. I think I don't think that the story from Sumatra is B-side story, because I myself close to Sumatran sastrawan Sumatera kan. They were born in Sumatra, and I think they were great sastrawan yang hidup sampai yang mungkin sudah meninggal gitu ya. But I feel like it's just a matter of where you look. That's how I feel. But if you think that maybe Indonesia is too Java-centric in a matter of literature, I think it's about time that the writers from others area also be more active and publish more book. And we know that it's kita masih kurang dengan penulis-penulis dari daerah sebetulnya. It's true that it's still Java centric, but I myself actually quite familiar with writers from other area of other than Java. That's what I think.
Thank you, Rati. Agustinus, can you?
Yeah, I think I'm very much agree with Rati. The last time we met was in festival in East Indonesia, in Makassar. Yeah, so yeah, I was invited to this festival several times, and in the Makassar International Writers Festival, they have a very great commitment to promote Indonesian writers from East Indonesia. So they have a very big quota to invite writers from Papua, Maluku, and then East Nusa Tenggara and Sulawesi. And of course, they also invite writers from Jakarta, like me and Rati, and some other prominent writers. I think this is a good platform, initiated by the local writer associations to promote the voices from the areas that we rarely hear. So when I arrived in Makassar, I was surprised to see many books, of course, from East Indonesia that we will never get in Jakarta because they are local publishers. There are many great books there, but we here have no chance to appreciate because their voice doesn't arrive here. And I also was invited to a writer festival in Berbagai. You have been there? No. That is Flores, yeah. Yeah, and Berbagai was a very interesting place that there is no bookstore in that place. It's very remote, but they still can hold national writer festival in Berbagai. So in the place where there is no bookstore, so they even, books are so expensive to get there because it's so remote. The transport is high. Even if they buy online, the book is much more expensive in the transport, in the postage charge than the books. So it's very hard for the people. But they're really eager to meet writers and to read books, and they still can hold writer festival there. So this is the two things that what I learned from these places. It's not only about promoting your own voice, but you also have to work with outside voice to make your voice heard. So with the case with the Makassar Writers or Berbagai Writers Festival, they also invite writers from the so-called center from Java to be there, to have exchange and to share maybe some techniques, and it can be learned by the locals. And if we talk about A side and B side, now we say that, okay, we are in the center, we are the so-called A side, but in the international scope, we are B sides. Yeah, we are unheard voice. Why we are unheard? Maybe our way of storytelling doesn't suit the global audience, and that's why maybe there are more Indian or Filipinos or Singaporean writers. They have more chance because they know how to write in English, which is more easier to be read by the global audience. Where in our way of storytelling, maybe we need like a little bit twitch or we have to consider who our audience is, and then we have to change or to adapt our storytelling to the audience. I take this from my own story as a Chinese Indonesian. If I just tell the story from the Chinese perspective, the majority Indonesians will not read it because it doesn't make sense for them. So I have to take the perspective of them, tell my story, and to explain the things that may not be easy to for the non-Chinese Indonesians to understand. By the way, I can infuse the Chinese stories in the mind of my readers. So when we write things, we have to always think about our audience. Writing is also communication. If you only talk in your own way without thinking whether your audience understand or appreciate it, nobody will read it. So we also have to think our technique and method of storytelling that is accepted by our audience.
Thank you, Agustinus. I think this is also the very essence of today's discussions, in which the A side and B sides is actually a call for questioning the A side itself. When the A side is made, you question the assumption behind it. For example, even the awards. When the award is made, that is an A side, right? How the award is made. So we question that, whether that is actually what we want to read, whether that is actually the best. Maybe the A side is the one that is dictated by the award committee or the governments. So this essence of the discussion is actually to call for an actions, to actually read the other than the B sides. Also a question, just like Eric mentioned, the pre-notions of the Singaporeans is they're not angry enough. They're very prosper, they're not avant-garde enough. So actually it's not. They are angry about something. We read the book of Brown is Redacted, for example. It's the anger of the Browns of the Singaporeans, for example. So this is exactly the session for that, so to call for an action, to question the assumption behind what makes an A. Because the narrative of the landscape of the Southeast Asian will never be complete if you only read one side that is dictated by what is called A. I think that. Okay, we have 9 minutes left according to the committee. We have one final questions before we split up and call it a night. Okay, please.
Selamat malam, terima kasih banyak untuk diskusinya yang sangat menarik. Saya Yoga, tadi ketika dengar cerita dari masing-masing narasumber, satu yang kepikiran adalah bahwa tadi kan yang diceritakan lebih banyak soal jenis ceritanya gitu ya, kayak cerita mana yang kemudian masuk side A atau side B. Nah saya penasaran terkait jalur penerbitannya sebetulnya. Kayak bagaimana cerita-cerita ini kemudian diterbitkan dan bisa sampai kepada pembaca. Kalau sebelumnya kan memang kayak ya mungkin sebelum maraknya media digital lah gitu ya. Si penerbit juga kan sebetulnya dia bisa kemudian jadi penentu mana cerita yang kemudian bisa dibaca sama orang, mana yang dianggap kurang cocok mungkin sama kebutuhannya mereka atau sama kebutuhan pembacanya. Nah kalau di Indonesia kan kita lihat banyak sekarang berkembang kayak platform digital yang bisa dipakai untuk orang nyampein cerita mereka gitu ya tanpa harus melalui kurasi. Dan harus ditentukan apakah kamu masuk side A atau tidak gitu. Nah saya penasaran dengan kondisi yang mungkin ada di Thailand sama di Filipina sih terutama gitu ya. Apakah muncul juga seperti itu? Apakah kayak misalnya mungkin penerbitan indie atau kayak tadi platform-platform digital yang dipakai orang untuk menyampaikan cerita mereka. Dan kalau misalnya memang iya, itu cerita-cerita apa sih yang muncul gitu ya. Dan bagaimana itu memperkaya cerita-cerita yang bisa dibaca di negara masing-masing. Terima kasih.
Thank you for the questions. I hope I can translate your questions correctly. So during the discussion, this is maybe a questions to Eric and Lee. During the discussion, we discuss about the type of stories in A and B, the type of the narrative in A and B. But there is also the influence of distribution or a publishing business that affect how a story become an A, how a story become a B, the independent publishing house, the bookstore chains, and etc. How does you reflect in the Philippines, Singapore, and as well as Thailand on this industry situation that affect a story can be reach a wider audience, and some stories, despite it is good, might not reach the wider audience? Maybe.
It's hard for me to talk about the Philippines in this regard because I'm not really into publishing there, but I suppose there are a lot of romances that sell in the Philippines. So the masses are looking for something titillating. And I guess many publishers cater to that. In Singapore, there are more A-list, A-side story publishers now with the closure of small independent presses. But that's to be expected, so there's economies of scale. And I was just looking at the bestsellers in Kinokuniya bookstore in Singapore this week, and 3 of the titles are Singaporean. But it's very telling what kind of books they are. At number 1 is Kishore Mahbubani's biography, and then somewhere down, maybe in the top 5 is Rick Kobach-Song's nonfiction about orchids, and then a little below him would be an authorized biography of Ezra Jaratnam. So these are A-listers. And I don't know what it is about Singapore that favors this sort of biography. So Singaporeans like success stories. Could it be because of the meritocracy that underlies the society? So there's this striving to be successful, and so people are looking for biographies of successful people. So they're really looking for A-side stories. So the B-side stories are not totally neglected. I already mentioned Malay sketches by Alfian Saad. I suppose people just need to tell the B-side stories and to tell them as well as they could, and they could actually sell. Yeah, so we have more of those stories and plays as well. Alfian had this play about the censoring body not censoring his play, and it was allowed by the IMDA. So that sort of thing could thrive even in Singapore. It's just a matter of pitching them. And writing them well, and then pitching them. Yes.
Okay, we have like 4 minutes left, and the time is ticking. So, and I am so this is really late at night. So if I talk anything that not make sense, I'm so sorry. But actually, I have a TED talk, and once in the TED talk, I said that. This is not the world that everybody go back to the home and watching television like one TV series or TV drama. There are no thing like the movie that everybody in Indonesia watch. It's not, okay, except for Nolan. But it's not like one series that everybody watch. So the attentions of people was like into the subculture and more niche market, and we have like horror club, maybe like mystery club, or maybe fantasy club, romantic club, girl loves club or something. That is why we have a lot of discussion here. What make an A side and A side, because maybe we are now in the world of decentralization, which A side is not the real or powerful A side anymore. Some B side can be like someone A side in their life. So, yeah, let's see. Rati told me that you talk about platform. Yes, in Thai, people sold and bought a lot of e-book because they live in condominium. We have the same situation in Hong Kong, that everybody was live in like small room and no place for hard copy book anymore. So we have e-book platform that sold a lot of. Some writer have like got many salary from the e-book, and it's even more than writer who has sold hard copy in the bookstore. So maybe we cannot use the shelves of bestseller in the bookstore at the A side anymore, because we don't have any proof that ebook on Amazon, on like Thai platform, is lower rate than the A side centralization of the book system. Because we don't have any proof anymore, and everything is maybe now B side.
Thank you so much, Lee. So yeah, audience, Saturday night, 2 hours, you talk about literary issues, and you survive and sitting in your seat. So it's applause to you, everybody. And also thank you so much for the speakers. This has been an interesting session. So have a good rest for the Saturday night, everybody, and thank you for the committee for having this discussion tonight. So applause for everybody.